My name is Renee Forsyth. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Lyme Connect. And just to provide a visual description, I am a white female with dark brown shoulder-length hair. I have a maroon blouse on, and I'm standing in front of a lime green with our Lyme logo branded background. And since we felt like this information about insight in learning about learning disabilities and hearing more about the experiences of our network members was so important, we wanted to share it with the public. So some of you who are joining may not be familiar with Lyme Connect. So I'm just going to take a moment to tell you a little bit more about us. At Lyme Connect, we are a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to rebrand disability through achievement. And we do that by attracting, preparing, and connecting high potential professionals and university students, including veterans, who have all different types of disabilities for scholarships, leadership programs, internships, and full-time careers with the world's leading corporations, our partners. And so if you're joining this call and you are an individual with a disability and you're not a member of our network, I encourage you to join. I know my colleague will be sharing the information about how to join in the chat. And there's no fee to join, and we encourage everyone who has a disability to join and take advantage of all of these great resources that we have at Lyme Connect. In turn, we also support our corporate partners. We have wonderful corporate partners, and we support them in their efforts to recruit, onboard, develop, retain, and promote all employees who have disabilities. So welcome to all of you, welcome to our partners, welcome to our network members, and we look forward to a wonderful session today. So this is continuing a series of webinars and discussions and panel discussions that we've had with our different network members who bring different experiences to the conversation. Today, we're focusing on learning disabilities, and we're happy to have 4 network members from the US and Canada join us for this important discussion, and you'll meet them in just a moment. But for right now, I'm so excited to introduce you to our moderator. Katherine Stein is our moderator. She's a Lyme Network member and a Lyme Connect Fellow from the class of 2017. Katherine is also a team lead in Google's Creative Lab, an interdisciplinary team of designers, writers, programmers, filmmakers, producers, and business thinkers. At Creative Lab, Katherine works to bring Google's latest AI research to life in products that are helpful to people. She helped develop and launch Interview Warmup, an AI-enabled interview prep tool that's available for free online to help people feel confident and prepared for their next interview. She also helped launch Conversation Mode, an early-stage accessibility feature in the Sound Amplifier app that uses on-device machine learning to help anyone better hear conversations in loud environments. Those are some really amazing projects that she worked on. Beyond her day-to-day job, Katherine has a deep passion for social impact and accessibility and has founded several initiatives at Google to improve accessibility both within and outside of the company. In her free time, if she has any after all of that, Katherine loves to practice playing the guitar and spending time outside in nature. So we're thrilled to have Katherine and all of the panelists join us. And Katherine, I would love to turn it over to you now.
Hello, thank you so much, Renee, for that really wonderful introduction. And welcome to everybody joining us today. So as somebody who has a learning disability myself, I have dyslexia, and I've learned so much through the Lyme program and the Lyme Connect community. It's really such an honor to be here for this discussion on insights into life and work with a learning disability. So to give a quick visual description, I'm a white woman with blonde hair. Today I'm wearing a blue sweater, and I'm in a room with mainly a white background, and you can see part of my window. So we have really incredible panelists today. So to kick us off, I'll invite each of them one by one to come in, introduce yourselves by sharing your name, position, learning disability, and a quick visual description. So David, I'll hand it over to you to kick us off.
Hey everyone, my name is David Martin. Just quick visual description first. I'm sitting in a fishbowl room in the Unilever office in Englewood Cliffs. I'm wearing a white checkered shirt, and I am a white man, about 6'3", with a short brown beard and brown hair. I work at Unilever as the Microsoft 365 solutions architect, and I have dyslexia and dysgraphia. So it's very nice to be with you all, and looking forward to talking and answering your questions at the end.
Thanks. Rachel, would you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Webb. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair. I am wearing a gray pullover with the EY logo. I have a white background. I also work for Ernst & Young, EY, as the acronym. I am a manager in our technology risk service line. So I do IT audits, so information technology audits on behalf of the financial audit side of the house. And I have dyslexia, and that is me for right now.
Thanks, Rachel. And last but not least, Daniel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Tench, and to follow on with the visual description there, I am a white man with shortish brown blonde hair, and I'm currently sitting in the TD office in Ottawa, Ontario, with a very brightly TD colored green wall next to me. A bit about myself: I'm currently an account manager with our national real estate group. So I do construction loans for Ottawa's largest home builders. And I'm an individual with a learning disability, dyslexia, that is caused by a mild physical disability.
Thank you all so much. All right, so maybe just to kick off some of our questions for all of the panelists, and to start us off, could each of you share just maybe a little bit more about your learning disability and then how it impacts each of you, whether personally or professionally? Again, starting with David.
Sure. So like I said, I have dyslexia and dysgraphia. Dyslexia, a lot of people have heard of. It's, of course, when you mix things around, when you read or sometimes speak them. Dysgraphia is the same thing, except when it comes to handwriting. As such, my handwriting is terrible. I rarely write on paper. And because of that, I really became in love and dependent with computers. And that kind of brought me to where I am today, working in IT for Unilever. I think that dyslexia for me is something that I've been accustomed to dealing with and working with most of my life. I was formally diagnosed in about the 6th grade, and that's when things really became the hardest for me, when I was starting to study advanced materials, especially in English and writing papers. I do kind of jumble words sometimes when I'm stressed and tired, but it's mostly with the reading and writing that I struggle with the most. So yeah, it's a little bit about mine.
Thanks so much for sharing, David. And Rachel, could you share a bit more with us too?
So I was diagnosed in 2nd grade at age 8 because my older brother was also diagnosed with learning disabilities and other cognitive disabilities. So I grew up in the special education system from 2nd grade all the way up until high school. And then back again in college, I received some accommodations. As a child, I was the one that held back the reading group to the 1-sentence page books when everyone else was starting to move on to more difficult reading books. It was definitely hard as a child because you don't understand why it's taking forever, why you learn your spelling words one week and then the next week you completely forget them. You don't know how to spell them again. For me, I do stumble upon my words fairly often. I use comedy to cover up my dyslexia a lot of times because I call them brain farts and I don't remember how to spell words to where I really can't. The what I'll call the wires are not connecting in my head to where I know the word, but sometimes it just doesn't want to come out.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, as someone with dyslexia, I'd say a lot of this feels very relatable. And yeah, Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, same sort of trajectory as everyone else here. Diagnosed at a young age. I had accommodations through school. One of the biggest accommodations that I used was text-to-speech software to help with the reading, the learning dyslexia there. And even that continued on into the banks. I'll get into that a little bit later.
Amazing. So I think when it comes to disability in the workplace, one of the biggest questions that will come up again and again is about disclosing and deciding if and when and how to disclose. So for our next question, could each of you share a bit about how, if you did, how you decided to disclose, and then what that conversation and process looked like? And also, keeping in mind for people who are on the call today, if there's anybody out there who might be deciding now about if or how they want to disclose their learning disability, do you have any advice or tips for them? David, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. Man, disclosing is such a complicated topic sometimes, right? Because there's so many different levels that you can disclose to. I think most commonly people will often the hardest one be disclosing to your line manager. For me, it really depends on the person and kind of the situation I'm in. I'll never formally disclose to someone in a one-on-one unless I've kind of dealt with them and know about them a little bit more until that happens. At Unilever, my journey has been a little bit different. I think Unilever is a really comfortable place where people can be who they are. So 4 or 5 years ago, Unilever was trying to get people to disclose more about their disabilities in our Workday system, our HR system, so that we could meet Unilever's goals and standards across the world and in the United States. And I trusted in the system, and the system is fully confidential. They really just want to know who their employees are so that they can better connect with them. But after I disclosed it in the system, I disclosed it to my line manager, and I had known him for a while, and it was just, okay, let's keep going then. So my advice for people with disclosure is know the situation you're in, feel comfortable with it, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice, and it's nice to hear about a situation where that went really smoothly and was helpful. And Rachel, what about your experience? How did that process go for you?
So I want to start off by saying disclosure can be formal and informal. Informal can just be within a conversation, talking to a friend to where you feel really comfortable. And then the formal would be going through your company's portals and networks and going through and identifying yourself that way. For me, I had 2 very significant disclosures in my professional career. So the first time was my first job right out of college. I was 2 weeks in. Nobody knew. I didn't know anybody. Nobody really knew me. And my partner, who is the top boss in the accounting world, asked me to sit in on a call and take notes. My worst fear come to life, especially to where I hate taking notes and I'm not good at following unless I have some topics already written down to help me follow. So anxiety shot through the roof, and I started crying right in front of her, saying the words I never wanted to say was that I have a disability, a learning disability in specific. And it was so refreshing for her not to ask questions or to say, oh, never mind. She just asked, what do you need? She's like, okay, we can work with this. What do you need? And it was a really happy moment in my life that somebody just asked, what do you need? It wasn't anything more. And then the second story I have was when I came to Ernst & Young, EY. I became the local leader for the Accessibilities Professional Network, which is a network for visible and non-visible disabilities for advocacy and for anyone who wants to join as an ally. I was at an event with our CEO and global chairman to where I got to ask him a question. And in my intro, I disclosed that I had a learning disability. And right after the event, 4 or 5 of my close coworkers came up to me. I'm shocked, I'm embarrassed. They just heard one of my deepest, darkest secrets. And I thought they were gonna be judging me. Their perception of me did change, but it was in a positive way of they felt comfortable then talking to me about themselves or having a niece or nephew, to where it really hit me right then and there that if I'm going to be a part of this network and help lead this network, I needed to be comfortable with myself and who I am for me to have other people feel comfortable in talking about themselves. And this is why I really think disclosure is a big piece of everyone's story.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think it talks about, kind of back to Lyme Connect's mission, the role of rebranding disability through achievement and telling our stories is a way to kind of just share more about what disability can look like in the workplace and at home. So thank you. And now, Daniel, we'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, no, for me, it worked very well when I decided to disclose. As most of the other panelists felt, it was a huge weight being relieved from my chest. I was very nervous before the disclosure. It felt like a huge weight coming off my chest. And it was taken incredibly well by my manager at the time. And one thing I keep telling all my fellow employees is, once you decide to disclose, the bank takes the approach as to let us know what you need and we will get you the help that you need. And I always tell my colleagues that the bank even goes so far to have an assistive technologies lab based in London, Ontario, where they have a group of IT professionals who are familiar with every single assistive device known, and they will make it work with the TD systems to make sure it's secure. And if it's even an assistive technology that they haven't seen before, they will take the time to make it fit with the TD system. So I think that's one thing that I like to spread to a lot of my colleagues, because once they know how to help you, they will go the extra mile for you. And the disclosure happened in 2 parts, one to my immediate supervisor, and then to the rest of my team, and then to the greater bank as a whole. And after I disclosed to more of my colleagues, more people would come up to me and be like, because you told me you had a learning disability, it gave me the comfort to be able to step forward and talk to my people manager and get the supports that I needed. So it's always really nice to see that you've been able to pay it forward and help someone else out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really beautiful and powerful. And I think sometimes, because it's not something everyone talks about all the time, we forget or don't realize how common it is to have a learning disability or a disability in general. And I found, at Google, when I've brought it up, I've learned suddenly from a whole lot of coworkers that they maybe have dyslexia too, or some other disability that I had never known about. And also, Danielle, so amazing that there's an assistive technology lab. Would love to learn more about that, but also kind of going off of the assistive technology piece and accommodations. Could you tell us a bit more about the accommodations that you found helpful, and then, also describe sort of the transformation that it helped to enable within your work?
Yeah, so one of the biggest assistive technology that I rely on is text-to-speech software, because I struggle with the reading comprehension side of things. So this ensures that I'm able to listen back to what I type, understand for any sort of grammatical spelling mistakes, and just to help make sure that the overall flow is there. That's something that's really helped me over the years. And even I was talking about it with one of my friends actually, that now a lot of these assistive technologies are starting to get brought into consumer products. So even your word processor now has a basic text to speech that people can rely on, or even a speech to text where if someone breaks their arm, they're able to continue on with their day-to-day function. So I've had shown that to colleagues before when they, let's say, had an injury for a temporary disability, as I like to call it there. And it's incredible to see the progress that's been made in the assistive technology space.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think to your point too, about how there's all different kinds of disabilities and some of them might be permanent and some temporary, and that helping as many people learn about the kinds of tools that can be helpful is really amazing, and great that you were able to like help some of your coworkers too to get exposure to those things when they needed it.
Yes.
Would you want to share any more about that before we go on?
No. One other thing I'll just mention briefly as well is with the dyslexia, struggling with, I'm on the Ottawa Quebec border there, and once you go across the bridge there, everything is in French. So with the learning disability, learning another language is tough. So I utilize, Google has a translate app where you can just hold it up and it'll translate directly on your phone. You don't have to take a photo, you just hold the camera up. And that has helped me immensely. And that's just a consumer run-of-the-mill app, no, not quote unquote assistive technology, but I'm able to utilize it as an assistive technology.
Right. Yeah, definitely very exciting to see all of these new tools coming out that can really help anyone. And yeah, Daniel, to your point of like how you've helped show other people that you've worked with how assistive technology can be helpful. Like I'm sure that they were really grateful. It helped you be honestly like a more supportive teammate, given your experience. So kind of going off of that, a question that I want to ask is, for our panelists, are there ways that your disability, do you think that it's actually made you a better employee or teammate too? Maybe starting with Rachel.
So growing up with dyslexia, I had to learn at a younger age how to manage my time, how to study, to where my friends in grade school, they were straight A's, never had to study. So when we got into college, they all started failing, not understanding what's so different about college versus grade school, to where I was succeeding and moving forward in my education, to which was something I never really thought of as a child, just based off of my experiences. Getting through college was a big success in my life, to where these skills have transitioned into the work world, to where on my team, they called me the finisher because I was able to manage the team. I was able to manage our deliverables, making sure it's like, okay, we have these big milestones. We need to get them done by the audit deadline date. How do we get there? Creating the schedules to make sure our team stayed on track. I'm not that creative or innovative, but I can surely project manage whatever idea that you can come up with. And these have made me a successful teammate because I'm able to be relied upon to help make sure we get to that end goal as a team.
I love that story, and that your coworkers have also come up with a name to recognize you in that way. So I think also, like, speaking of coworkers and collaboration and working on teams, maybe to pivot just a bit, let's say that somebody who's joining this call today has a coworker who has recently disclosed a learning disability to them. What are some strategies or techniques that you might have for how that person could be supportive their teammate. Rachel, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I think for most people, everyone just wants to be heard and listened to. So instead of trying to push your own ways of thinking and how you've learned in the past, is really asking the individual, what do they need? How do they work best? Especially to where if they just recently disclosed, learning more about it and being open to it. I had a staff member who had ADHD, and they needed to not sit in the team room. We used to get a room all together to where 6 or 7 of us would sit together, to where there was a lot of chatting going on, a lot of eating of food, so different smells and different sounds, to where it was distracting them. So the easiest and best idea for us was, well, we have all these workstations right outside of the team room. You can sit right out there, so we can come and get you whenever we need you on a call, and you can still be relatively close to the team and still be a part of the team whenever we have discussions going on. And really just working with the individual and seeing what they need was the best idea I had in doing that. It made him successful. He was able to get his work done on time, and it was good quality because he wasn't distracted.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think that's some great advice. And how about David? Do you have any thoughts or advice on this that you'd like to share?
I think we can all draw on our own experience of disclosing and like kind of being accepted for the disabilities we might have, visible or invisible. I think it's just really key to like go with the flow of the person that just disclosed to you. If they just disclosed to you, that's a really big thing. And offer your support and say, hey, if you want to talk about this more, for sure talk about it more, right? If not, don't push it. The fact that they disclosed means they'll probably be willing to take that extra step and talk a little bit more if they need things. And when they do, just be receptive, right? Offer as much advice as you can for what they're asking. And if you can't, be honest and say you can't, and maybe say, hey, I might know someone else that you can talk to, right? I think it's important in those situations where you're giving a referral to just make sure that you're not going behind the person's back to that person that you're referring and saying, hey, I just spoke to this person. He might come and talk to you about a learning disability, and you should give him this advice, right? It's not up to you to disclose. It's up to them, right? So you can give the referral, you can support, but my best advice is to just be open and be ready.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and definitely what I would like to see in a coworker if I were to disclose to them. So, also going off of just advice for and thoughts going out to people who are here today. For each of you, I'm curious, what is one thing that you really wish that everybody knew about what the experience of living with your disability is like? So, David, back to you on that.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think there was a question in the chat that came through that was a really honest story. I think for me, the biggest thing is not to lose your passions in exchange for the supplemental work that's needed to either work with your disability, overcome your disability, do better with your disability. It's always going to be extra work, but don't sacrifice the things that you love for it, right? Because that's going to give you the energy. When I was first diagnosed in the 6th grade, the next year I repeated the 6th grade. And then the school that I went to, I had extra learning classes where I would disappear into a room either by myself or with one other person. And we'd sit and we'd do reading exercises and writing exercises as well. There is no extra time at school when you go to school. So that time was pulled from science and math for me. And I really resented that because I really loved science and math, and being in a place that I didn't want to be, losing the opportunity of the other thing, made it even harder for me to be passionate about that. So like with everything, you are going to be your best advocate. So make sure you advocate for yourself. And even though there's going to be extra work ahead of you, don't sacrifice the things you love.
Thanks. What about you, Rachel? What's something that you wish people watching knew?
Something I would wish people would learn and understand is, especially with a learning disability, it's not a life sentence. I say that sounds harshly, but it's real. As a child, I thought, watching my brother and how he was studying and doing homework for my parents, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be hard. I don't know if I'll be able to make it through high school. You know, seeing as I grew up, I really pushed myself. I was able to build those skills that I would not have had if I did not have the disability. As I mentioned earlier, my friends were straight A's. Some of them didn't make it through college. I was able to graduate high school with my associate's degree and graduate college in 3 years versus 4. And this is all because my disability led me to drive harder and work smarter. And that you're not going to fail. Life is hard in general. It's just working harder and working smarter. Since David brought up the chat, I did see that somebody had asked about their son. And I would say when I was in the 5th grade, I was still reading on a 2nd grade reading level. And it took me finding a book, to which I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. I read my first chapter book in 6th grade at the age of 11 or 12. It was called Mates, Dates, and Inflatable Bras. And it was about these girls in London, and they were around my age. And it just really got my brain going and wanted to read more about them because I was kind of able to relate to them. And that's what really kicked off my reading. I had never truly read by myself up until that time frame of finding something that really just connected with me. So I would say to that individual, whatever your son is interested in, let him be interested in it. Let him find that passion within that to actually help him build those skills to then get him through the academics. Once again, it's not a life sentence. It helps to build different sorts of skills.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I, kind of thinking back to my childhood and learning how to read and the struggles there, I think that, just like even for kids, like finding things, if school is tough, like in extracurriculars, where you can also like build confidence that then seeps into other places in your life, I think is really helpful and moving. And Daniel, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, so just building a little bit off what Rachel said, one thing that really helped me when I was a child, but also in the professional world, is know yourself and don't be afraid to find and test out different ways of solving a problem or even learning. So as a child, like if everyone in a class is learning using certain strategies, don't be afraid to step back and say, look at some other techniques that you can use yourself in order for you to be successful. Just because the majority is learning something at one pace and one certain way doesn't mean that you also have to follow in that same progression.
Yeah, completely. So Renee, should we go ahead? Actually, okay, I think we have one more question before we open it up to the rest of like questions from people joining. So before we wrap up this part of the event today, for each of you, what advice would you give to people who are joining this webinar who are living with a learning disability themselves? Rachel, you can kick us off on this one.
One piece of advice that took me years to learn that I would hope others can learn a little bit faster than I did was self-acceptance. Accept that you are different, and different is not bad. Learn yourself and how you learn best and how you function the best, and you will be your best self.
I love that. And I think this is great advice for everybody who both, whether you have a learning disability or not, just getting to know how you learn best and what you need is amazing. And I think we don't always talk about it enough. And what about you, David?
I think there's a great question in the chat that someone said, I have a trouble managing time, projects, hobbies, and I feel like I'm all over the place. I'd like to know how to manage time, right? And I think like time, thoughts, everything in your head, right, is not a physical thing, right? So find a technology, find a physical medium that you can use and organize yourself that way. For me, my partner instituted a Kanban-like board at our house where we would take all our important things that we needed to do and put each one on a sticky note. And then that sticky note is on our wall in our office, and it kind of sits there and it reminds us of the things that we need to do. And it was a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's really satisfying to take that sticky note and move it from the to-do side to the doing side and then to the done side, right? And then it really helps like not have to have everything jumbled up, but down on, like I said, a physical medium. But with that advice I'm giving you, the most important thing I can tell you is whatever system you implement, whatever system you try, do not try and take your entire life or all your projects or everything you're doing at your job and put it into that system all at once. You will fail. Your body needs to learn these systems. You need to kind of adapt to how you're learning, how you're working. Take things literally one at a time. Take one project you're working on and use the new system with it. Once you can use the new system with that project successfully, add another project on top, right? If you try and add everything together in a new way of working, it won't work out, and you might miss out on an opportunity of something that would work out if you just gave it a little bit more time and a little bit slower. So that's the advice that I have for someone who needs help organizing themselves. By the way, I'm still not fully organized.
Thank you so much. And Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, so just kind of building off of what I said earlier, and I'll give kind of more of an example here, is one of the things I do in the community is I'm a mentor for Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Ottawa. And I'm paired up with a little brother who has a similar condition to myself, a similar physical disability, that is. And so we've been matched for about 6 years now. So I know him pretty well, and I built a good rapport with him. And I suspect he may have a bit of a mild learning disability as well. And so I've been trying to give him some sort of advice that I was saying earlier is don't be afraid to look at something as a new approach. All his classmates are looking at a math problem, let's say, and they're purely memorizing it. And I'm like, Ayush, if we look at here, let's find and understand the problem. And then that way, if it changes a bit, you're able to solve the next one. And so that's been working well for him, but it's all about each person has a different way of learning. So it's don't be afraid to try something different. Let's say if you're learning spelling, instead of writing it out 10 times, the word, that may work for some people. It may, for other people, learning, let's say, some of the grammatical rules would be more beneficial to them. So it's just everyone has their own different learning style, different accommodations per se. You'll try some assistive technologies, some will work for you, and some may not be as effective for you. I see there's some stuff in the chat about assistive technologies, so I'll just touch on the one that I use very quickly. It's called Kurzweil 3000, and for text to speech, I find this to be the most beneficial because it highlights the word as it's being read. And then you can even select the speed that it goes. Do you want it to select the whole paragraph as well and then highlight within that? There's just so many options that I find that works really well for me. I've tried other ones that haven't been as effective, but other people use them and they find them incredibly effective. So it's all just about, you got to try the different things that are out there and you have to find what works for you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'd say, we were speaking before this seminar, one thing we talked about was assistive technology and what each of us did. And I think, like, even for me, from a more personal standpoint, I've grown to really love audiobooks, and audio is a format, and I think it fits into so many different nooks and crannies of life. Whereas, when you're sitting down and reading something, you don't always have time for it in the same way if you're commuting or doing other things. But yeah, I have been really inspired by hearing all of your stories. And, I think something I'd like to leave everyone with too before we jump into the questions is just, there's been so many stories throughout this conversation of strengths that come about, whether it has to do innately with the disability or as a result of, figuring out how to make do in a world that isn't necessarily like at every point built for you. And I think those stories are really inspiring, and something that, finding your way to lean into that and lean into your passions and strengths has been really helpful for me and in my career so far. And I think also through the process of, existing in a world that sometimes like wasn't built with you in mind, there's a lot of compassion probably that gets built there. And through Lyme, I know I've learned so much about what other people's experiences are like with other disabilities. And now I have a lot to continue learning, but I'm really grateful that through my own dyslexia, it's led me here and with all of you. So with that, Renee, I'll pass it over to you to go through some of the audience questions.
And we're grateful that you're here too, Catherine, and we're grateful for all four of you. So thank you for all your insights so far. I'm sure you're all seeing this is blowing up over here, so I'm going to try to collapse it as much as possible so that we do finish on time. There are a number of questions around being in college and asking for accommodations in college, maybe not knowing what you need in college. Can any of you touch on that and what that experience was like if you haven't already shared that earlier?
Hey, this is Rachel. I can talk about that because it really resonates with me. So in college, I didn't want to use accommodations, but after talking to a professor, I decided to go to our disability resource office and talk to them. And one of the things that really helped me in college was getting the PowerPoint slides prior to class. So I didn't have to try to write what's on the board and listen to the professor at the same time. Having those conversations with the professor, or actually talking to them. I know sometimes professors think, oh, like you're just this, you don't really need this. Well, yeah, I actually do. And if you actually speak to them about it, it helps out. Talking about stamina too, when you're in college, a full day of studying, taking study breaks, watch YouTube. When I was tutoring in college, I would tell people, go on to YouTube and find a professor that you like. I can remember in marine biology class, watching all these dissection videos on YouTube so I could memorize them real quick for the exam. But also for certifications, I found different teachers online on YouTube that I learned from better, and I could just repeat watching the videos that really helped me get it down. And taking breaks. As you all are currently in school, for some of those that are in school, you don't have classes back to back anymore. Professional world's kind of like that, to where your deadlines, yeah, you might have deadlines, but some of them are flexible to where it's more of a milestone of, okay, we need to get here so we can make it to the deadline. You don't have to feel as stringent and as organized as like potentially like grade school was. I know college was a big relief for some people to where they were able to learn differently and have a different schedule than having to take 8 a.m. classes. They could take the 2 p.m. classes. So you can kind of work your work schedule even like that too.
Anybody else have any comments? David?
Yeah, I'm in the similar camp as Rachel. In college, I got time and a half on written tests because my handwriting was not the best. I think we can all resonate maybe my generation to the little blue book test, right? You gotta fill the pages of the little blue book, right? So any one of those tests where I was writing and a computer could not be used, I would just get time and a half for that. Really more in the professional world and in college as well, there were moments where I would join meetings or be in a class where the person would say, okay, I want everyone's attention, laptops down, close the lids, right? And for me, that was just like a non-issue, right? Because like a non-starter, I mean, I have to have my laptop to type and to like get the notes down on paper. So in those situations, my advice is try and continue to use your technology if it's not a conflict. If it becomes a conflict, obviously you have to adapt, but speak with the person who's setting those rules as soon as possible. Have a one-on-one discussion with them. I remember in one of my first large meetings at Unilever, one of our directors said those exact words. I want everyone's focused attention, laptops down, right? I kept my laptop open and he saw me and he didn't say anything in the moment. But before he could say anything to me, I came to him and I said, hey, I'm going to keep doing this in meetings. I'm going to keep having my laptop open and keep taking notes because it's what I need. And I just emailed you some of the notes that I took, right? And he loved the notes so much, he asked me to continue to take notes. And Rachel, I know it's one of your biggest fears, but for me, writing it down and typing it out is one of the biggest ways that I can absorb the information. So in that situation, it worked out really well.
Great, thank you both. So moving from college into the workforce and sort of going through that recruiting process, we have a number of questions about disclosing during the recruiting process, disclosing to recruiters. So this question I think is a good encapsulation of it. Do you have any tips for how to request accommodations? For example, extra time, break time, etc., during the recruitment process? What should we tell or not tell interviewers while requesting accommodations? And I'll just make a couple comments before I turn it over to you for your experience. We do have a coach. So if you are having some concerns around this, I encourage you to make a coaching appointment with our coach and kind of talk through that particular situation. And we do have webinars that are also archived, but we do it live as well, about how to disclose and what kind of information to share and how to approach that with different individuals. So just kind of in a nutshell, you really only need to disclose what's relevant for that particular conversation. Each company may have their own process about what information you need to provide them. That's really, dependent on their process. But you don't need to go into great detail. You don't need to tell them your whole history, your experience in grade school and high school. All of that is not relevant for that conversation. You really just need to let them know that you have a disability and what type of accommodation you need to be successful in the process. I'm simplifying it a little bit because they may need a little bit more information than that, but just to kind of touch on that, you don't need to go into great depth, sort of like we're talking about here, but this is a different purpose. So I don't know if anybody wants to talk about, I know Kat, you've been through the recruiting process not that long ago. Do you want to touch on anything here? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, and through my own process with recruiting and the approach there in general, I think one thing that was helpful was a lot of the people I recruited with were Lyme partners. And so I think that gave me already a good idea and a positive signal about what that experience would be like. But I think that it's something that's also so personal. I think in so many different ways and interactions, I don't find my disability impacting the recruiting process as much as maybe like certain kinds of roles that or responsibilities that come and go on the job.
Great. Anybody else have thoughts about this, the recruiting process, or if not during the recruiting process, sort of taking it into work that you haven't shared yet?
This is Rachel. I can talk a little bit. I did not disclose during the interview process, but I do have other coworkers who had to disclose because of physical disabilities. And one of the nice things that I learned through them is that even during the interview process, or after you are hired, we specifically have digital accessibilities and a accessible technologies director. So they actually help you identify what type of technologies you'll need. So you don't have to go in knowing all the answers. You just got to know which questions to ask. Like I have low vision, so I need something that helps me read bigger font, and they'll be able to answer that technology question piece for you.
That's a really great point. Thank you, Rachel. Building on that a little bit, and I'm a little bit curious myself, you all sort of mentioned a few different technologies that you use personally that you find really get you through and helpful, and a few people in the chat have also mentioned them. How do you go about keeping up with new technology, trying out different things? How do you find these resources so that people who maybe are supporting their children are looking for new resources themselves because what they're using isn't working? Any advice on how to go about trying out new things?
Sure, I'll start with that. I'm coming from a place of real privilege now because my current job role that I just took is evaluating new technologies from Microsoft. And I have to say that the disabilities world has really impacted a lot of the technology that everyone uses in their day-to-day. When we're on Microsoft Teams now, there is live closed captioning and transcription. And Microsoft's next release is going to take that live closed captioning and transcription and give you the option to translate it into a different language. So maybe you're not a native English speaker, but you're on a call and you see the closed captions there. Well, maybe reading for you is even harder than listening to it in that non-native language. All of a sudden you can translate it now. I mean, technology is all around us. I think to answer your question at the beginning, Renee, of how do we keep up with it, you really have to be your own best self-advocate, right? If you know that technology is helping you, go to those providers, see if they have a forum, see if there's other people there that also use the technology in the same way you do. Connect with those people if it's helpful. Keep up with their latest releases. It's constantly changing. We all know how quick technology is changing. So don't feel that switching tools can be a bad thing either. Go out and keep trying stuff. I know for me, computers are just a gateway of possibility. I'm really, really happy to see what technology is going to be doing for our world and for people with disabilities in the future as well.
Daniel, I saw you. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was just going to I see there's quite a bit in the chat, and it seems to be at the university perspective. So I'll go back a few years to when I was a student here. And at school, in our accessibility group, there was an accessibility lab where you could demo a lot of these different accessible technologies, and you could rent them out. And even if there was one you wanted to try, sometimes they could even order it in for you. But as David mentioned, they're always refining these technologies as time progresses. Someone in the chat was talking about one of these pens that you can write with, and it also records, let's say during a lecture. So you can listen back, place it on the paper, and it'll play back what was being said when you took that note. I understand that even in the last year or so, they've come out with a new model of that pen, and it works a lot better than the previous generation. So it's always, as David said, if it didn't work before, don't be afraid to give it another go, because it's always progressing and it's always getting better.
Fantastic. Any last thoughts on that? Okay. We're wrapping up. There's one real quick question that I'm going to answer. Someone asked, is it appropriate to bring up legal protections when disclosing your disability, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, or does that seem threatening to employers? We do not approach it at Lyme Connect from a legal perspective. That's not our expertise in disability law. The American with Disabilities Act is obviously a great act and put some protections in place for a good reason. And again, I would recommend that you make an appointment with Helen and she put her information in there. But I think it's really, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of you, I think you really want to come at it with the belief that these individuals want to see you succeed, whether in the recruiting process or at work. So you don't want to be, leading with the law and what you are owed, or what your coverage is under the law, because you want that to be an interactive process. You want them to engage with you, and you want to bring solutions that work for yourself. So it would not be my recommendation to lead with that. Obviously, you may need to lean on it if things progress in a negative direction, but that's not our suggestion. And you all nodded, so I think we're all good on that. We're at 1 p.m. Wow, that went really fast. I just want to say thank you, Katherine, for moderating such a great panel. David, Daniel, Rachel, so great to hear all of your stories. And we thank you for taking the afternoon with us, or the morning, wherever you might be. And again, join the network. If you're not a member, join Friends of Lyme. You will be getting this recording. And thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.